What is Property? An Inquiry into the Principle of Right and of Government, by Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. Chapter 2. Property as a Natural Right. The Roman law defined property as the right to use and abuse one's own within the limits of the law. Jus utendi et abutendi res sua, guatinus juris ratio patitur. A justification of the word abuse has been attempted, on the ground that it signifies not senseless and immoral abuse, but only absolute domain. Vain distinction, invented as an excuse for property, and powerless against the frenzy of possession, which it neither prevents nor represses. The proprietor may, if he chooses, allow his crops to rot underfoot, sow his field with salt, milk his cows on the sand, change his vineyard into a desert, and use his vegetable garden as a park. Do these things constitute abuse or not? In the matter of property, use and abuse are necessarily indistinguishable. According to the Declaration of Rights, published as a preface to the Constitution of '93, property is "the right to enjoy and dispose at will of one's goods, one's income, and the fruit of one's labor and industry." Code Napoleon, Article 544, "Property is the right to enjoy and dispose of things in the most absolute manner, provided we do not overstep the limits prescribed by the laws and regulations." These two definitions do not differ from that of the Roman law. All give the proprietor an absolute right over a thing; and as for the restriction imposed by the code, provided we do not overstep the limits prescribed by the laws and regulations, its object is not to limit property, but to prevent the domain of one proprietor from interfering with that of another. That is a confirmation of the principle, not a limitation of it. There are different kinds of property. 1. Property pure and simple, the dominant and seigniorial power over a thing, or, as they term it, naked property. 2. Possession. Possession, says Duranton, is a matter of fact, not of right. Toullier: property is a right, a legal power; possession is a fact. The tenant, the farmer, the commandite, the usufructuary, are possessors; the owner who lets and lends for use, the heir who is to come into possession on the death of a usufructuary, are proprietors. If I may venture the comparison, a lover is a possessor, a husband is a proprietor. This double definition of property, domain and possession, is of the highest importance, and it must be clearly understood in order to comprehend what is to follow. From the distinction between possession and property arise two sorts of rights: the jus in re, the right in a thing, the right by which I may reclaim the property which I have acquired in whatever hands I find it; and the jus ad rem, the right to a thing, which gives me a claim to become a proprietor. Thus the right of the partners to a marriage over each other's person is the jus in re; that of two who are betrothed is only the jus ad rem. In the first, possession and property are united; the second includes only naked property. With me, who, as a laborer, have a right to the possession of the products of nature and my own industry, and who, as a proletaire, enjoy none of them, it is by virtue of the jus ad rem that I demand admittance to the jus in re. This distinction between the jus in re and the jus ad rem is the basis of the famous distinction between possessoire and petitoire, actual categories of jurisprudence, the whole of which is included within their vast boundaries. Petitoire refers to every thing relating to property; possessoire to that relating to possession. In writing this memoir against property, I bring against universal society an action petitoire. I prove that those who do not possess today are proprietors by the same title as those who do possess. But instead of inferring therefrom that property should be shared by all, I demand, in the name of general security, its entire abolition. If I fail to win my case, there is nothing left for us, the proletarian class and myself, but to cut our throats. We can ask nothing more from the justice of nations. For, as the Code of Procedure, Article 26, tells us in its energetic style, the plaintiff who has been non-suited in an action petitoire is debarred thereby from bringing an action possessoire. If, on the contrary, I gain the case, we must then commence an action possessoire, that we may be reinstated in the enjoyment of the wealth of which we are deprived by property. I hope that we shall not be forced to that extremity, but these two actions cannot be prosecuted at once, such a course being prohibited by the same Code of Procedure. Before going to the heart of the question, it will not be useless to offer a few preliminary remarks. Section 1. Property as a natural right. The Declaration of Rights has placed property in its list of the natural and inalienable rights of man, four in all: liberty, equality, property, security. What rule did the legislators of '93 follow in compiling this list? None. They laid down principles just as they discussed sovereignty in the laws, from a general point of view and according to their own opinion. They did everything in their own blind way. If we can believe Toullier, the absolute rights can be reduced to three: security, liberty, property. Equality is eliminated by the Rennes professor. Why? Is it because liberty implies it, or because property prohibits it? On this point the author of Droit civil explique is silent. It has not even occurred to him that the matter is under discussion. Nevertheless, if we compare these three or four rights with each other, we find that property bears no resemblance whatever to the others; that for the majority of citizens it exists only potentially, and as a dormant faculty without exercise; that for the others who do enjoy it, it is susceptible of certain transactions and modifications which do not harmonize with the idea of a natural right; that, in practice, governments, tribunals, and laws do not respect it; and finally that everybody, spontaneously and with one voice, regards it as chimerical. Liberty is inviolable. I can neither sell nor alienate my liberty. Every contract, every condition of a contract, which has in view the alienation or suspension of liberty, is null. The slave, when he plants his foot upon the soil of liberty, at that moment becomes a free man. When society seizes a malefactor and deprives him of his liberty, it is a case of legitimate defense. Whoever violates the social compact by the commission of a crime declares himself a public enemy. In attacking the liberty of others, he compels them to take away his own. Liberty is the original condition of man. To renounce liberty is to renounce the nature of man. After that, how could we perform the acts of man? Likewise, equality before the law suffers neither restriction nor exception. All Frenchmen are equally eligible to office. Consequently, in the presence of this equality, condition and family have, in many cases, no influence upon choice. The poorest citizen can obtain judgment in the courts against one occupying the most exalted station. Let the millionaire Ahab build a chateau upon the vineyard of Naboth. The court will have the power, according to the circumstances, to order the destruction of the chateau, though it has cost millions, and to force the trespasser to restore the vineyard to its original state and pay the damages. The law wishes all property that has been legitimately acquired to be kept inviolate without regard to value and without respect for persons. The Charter demands, it is true, for the exercise of certain political rights, certain conditions of fortune and capacity, but all publicists know that the legislator's intention was not to establish a privilege, but to take security. Provided the conditions fixed by law are complied with, every citizen may be an elector, and every elector eligible. The right, once acquired, is the same for all. The law compares neither persons nor votes. I do not ask now whether this system is the best. It is enough that, in the opinion of the Charter and in the eyes of everyone, equality before the law is absolute, and, like liberty, admits of no compromise. It is the same with the right of security. Society promises its members no halfway protection, no sham defense. It binds itself to them as they bind themselves to it. It does not say to them, I will shield you, provided it costs me nothing. I will protect you if I run no risks thereby. It says, I will defend you against everybody. I will save and avenge you, or perish myself. The whole strength of the state is at the service of each citizen. The obligation which binds them together is absolute. How different with property! Worshipped by all, it is acknowledged by none. Laws, morals, customs, public and private conscience, all plot its death and ruin. To meet the expenses of government, which has armies to support, tasks to perform, and officers to pay, taxes are needed. Let all contribute to these expenses, nothing more just. But why should the rich pay more than the poor? That is just, they say, because they possess more. I confess that such justice is beyond my comprehension. Why are taxes paid? To protect all in the exercise of their natural rights: liberty, equality, security, and property; to maintain order in the state; to furnish the public with useful and pleasant conveniences. Now, does it cost more to defend the rich man's life and liberty than the poor man's? Who, in time of invasion, famine, or plague, causes more trouble, the large proprietor who escapes the evil without the assistance of the state, or the laborer who sits in his cottage unprotected from danger? Is public order endangered more by the worthy citizen or by the artisan and journeyman? Why, the police have more to fear from a few hundred laborers out of work than from 200,000 electors. Does the man of large income appreciate more keenly than the poor man national festivities, clean streets, and beautiful monuments? Why, he prefers his country seat to all the popular pleasures, and when he wants to enjoy himself he does not wait for the greased pole. One of two things is true: either the proportional tax affords greater security to the larger taxpayers, or else it is a wrong. Because if property is a natural right, as the Declaration of '93 declares, all that belongs to me by virtue of this right is as sacred as my person. It is my blood, my life, myself. Whoever touches it offends the apple of my eye. My income of 100,000 francs is as inviolable as the grisette's daily wage of 75 centimes. Her attic is no more sacred than my suite of apartments. The tax is not levied in proportion to strength, size, or skill. No more should it be levied in proportion to property. If then the state takes more from me, let it give me more in return, or cease to talk of equality of rights. For otherwise society is established not to defend property, but to destroy it. The state, through the proportional tax, becomes the chief of robbers. The state sets the example of systematic pillage. The state should be brought to the bar of justice at the head of those hideous brigands, that execrable mob which it now kills from motives of professional jealousy. But, they say, the courts and the police force are established to restrain this mob. Government is a company not exactly for insurance, for it does not insure, but for vengeance and repression. The premium which this company exacts, the tax, is divided in proportion to property, that is, in proportion to the trouble which each piece of property occasions the avengers and repressors paid by the government. This is anything but the absolute and inalienable right of property. Under this system the poor and the rich distrust and make war upon each other. But what is the object of the war? Property. So that property is necessarily accompanied by war upon property. The liberty and security of the rich do not suffer from the liberty and security of the poor. Far from that, they mutually strengthen and sustain each other. The rich man's right of property, on the contrary, has to be continually defended against the poor man's desire for property. What a contradiction! In England they have a poor rate. They wish me to pay this tax. But what relation exists between my natural and inalienable right of property and the hunger from which 10 million wretched people are suffering? When religion commands us to assist our fellows, it speaks in the name of charity, not in the name of law. The obligation of benevolence imposed upon me by Christian morality cannot be imposed upon me as a political tax for the benefit of any person or poorhouse. I will give alms when I see fit to do so, when the sufferings of others excite in me that sympathy of which philosophers talk and in which I do not believe. I will not be forced to bestow them. No one is obliged to do more than comply with this injunction. In the exercise of your own rights do not encroach upon the rights of another. An injunction which is the exact definition of liberty. Now, my possessions are my own. No one has a claim upon them. I object to the placing of the third theological virtue in the order of the day. Everybody in France demands the conversion of the 5% bonds. They demand thereby the complete sacrifice of one species of property. They have the right to do it if public necessity requires it. But where is the just indemnity promised by the Charter? Not only does none exist, but this indemnity is not even possible. For if the indemnity were equal to the property sacrificed, the conversion would be useless. The State occupies the same position today toward the bondholders that the city of Calais did when besieged by Edward III toward its notables. The English conqueror consented to spare its inhabitants, provided it would surrender to him its most distinguished citizens to do with as he pleased. Eustache and several others offered themselves. It was noble in them, and our ministers should recommend their example to the bondholders. But had the city the right to surrender them? Assuredly not. The right to security is absolute. The country can require no one to sacrifice himself. The soldier standing guard within the enemy's range is no exception to this rule. Wherever a citizen stands guard, the country stands guard with him. Today is the turn of the one, tomorrow of the other. When danger and devotion are common, flight is parricide. No one has the right to flee from danger. No one can serve as a scapegoat. The maxim of Caiaphas, "It is right that a man should die for his nation," is that of the populace and of tyrants, the two extremes of social degradation. It is said that all perpetual annuities are essentially redeemable. This maxim of civil law, applied to the State, is good for those who wish to return to the natural equality of labor and wealth. But, from the point of view of the proprietor, and in the mouth of conversionists, it is the language of bankrupts. The State is not only a borrower, it is an insurer and guardian of property. Granting the best of security, it assures the most inviolable possession. How, then, can it force open the hands of its creditors, who have confidence in it, and then talk to them of public order and security of property? The State, in such an operation, is not a debtor who discharges his debt. It is a stock company which allures its stockholders into a trap, and there, contrary to its authentic promise, exacts from them 20, 30, or 40% of the interest on their capital. That is not all. The State is a university of citizens joined together under a common law by an act of society. This act secures all in the possession of their property, guarantees to one his field, to another his vineyard, to a third his rents, and to the bondholder, who might have bought real estate but who preferred to come to the assistance of the Treasury, his bonds. The State cannot demand, without offering an equivalent, the sacrifice of an acre of the field, or a corner of the vineyard. Still less can it lower rents. Why should it have the right to diminish the interest on bonds? This right could not justly exist, unless the bondholder could invest his funds elsewhere to equal advantage. But being confined to the State, where can he find a place to invest them, since the cause of conversion, that is, the power to borrow to better advantage, lies in the State? That is why a government, based on the principle of property, cannot redeem its annuities without the consent of their holders. The money deposited with the Republic is property which it has no right to touch while other kinds of property are respected. To force their redemption is to violate the social contract and outlaw the bondholders. The whole controversy as to the conversion of bonds finally reduces itself to this. Question: Is it just to reduce to misery 45,000 families who derive an income from their bonds of 100 francs or less? Answer: Is it just to compel 7 or 8 millions of taxpayers to pay a tax of 5 francs when they should pay only 3? It is clear, in the first place, that the reply is in reality no reply. But to make the wrong more apparent, let us change it thus: Is it just to endanger the lives of 100,000 men when we can save them by surrendering 100 heads to the enemy? Reader, decide. All this is clearly understood by the defenders of the present system, yet nevertheless sooner or later the conversion will be effected and property be violated, because no other course is possible, because property, regarded as a right, and not being a right, must of right perish, because the force of events, the laws of conscience, and physical and mathematical necessity must, in the end, destroy this illusion of our minds. To sum up, liberty is an absolute right, because it is to man what impenetrability is to matter, a sine qua non of existence. Equality is an absolute right, because without equality there is no society. Security is an absolute right, because in the eyes of every man his own liberty and life are as precious as another's. These three rights are absolute, that is, susceptible of neither increase nor diminution, because in society each associate receives as much as he gives: liberty for liberty, equality for equality, security for security, body for body, soul for soul, in life and in death. But property, in its derivative sense and by the definitions of law, is a right outside of society. For it is clear that, if the wealth of each was social wealth, the conditions would be equal for all, and it would be a contradiction to say, property is a man's right to dispose at will of social property. Then, if we are associated for the sake of liberty, equality, and security, we are not associated for the sake of property. Then, if property is a natural right, this natural right is not social, but antisocial. Property and society are utterly irreconcilable institutions. It is as impossible to associate two proprietors as to join two magnets by their opposite poles. Either society must perish, or it must destroy property. If property is a natural, absolute, imprescriptible, and inalienable right, why in all ages has there been so much speculation as to its origin? For this is one of its distinguishing characteristics: the origin of a natural right. Good God! Who ever inquired into the origin of the rights of liberty, security, or equality? They exist by the same right that we exist. They are born with us, they live and die with us. With property it is very different indeed. By law, property can exist without a proprietor, like equality without a subject. It exists for the human being who as yet is not, and for the octogenarian who is no more, and yet, in spite of these wonderful prerogatives, which savor of the eternal and the infinite, they have never found the origin of property. The doctors still disagree. On one point only are they in harmony, namely, that the validity of the right of property depends upon the authenticity of its origin. But this harmony is their condemnation. Why have they acknowledged the right before settling the question of origin? Certain classes do not relish investigation into the pretended titles to property, and its fabulous and perhaps scandalous history. They wish to hold to this proposition: that property is a fact, that it always has been and always will be. With that proposition the savant Proudhon commenced his Treatise on the Right of Usufruct, regarding the origin of property as a useless question. Perhaps I would subscribe to this doctrine, believing it inspired by a commendable love of peace, were all my fellow citizens in comfortable circumstances. But no, I will not subscribe to it. The titles on which they pretend to base the right of property are two in number: occupation and labor. I shall examine them successively, under all their aspects and in detail, and I remind the reader that, to whatever authority we appeal, I shall prove beyond a doubt that property, to be just and possible, must necessarily have equality for its condition.